All right, it says we're good. Okay, welcome to the group meeting. This is super exciting. I'm excited. There's only 2 more group meetings. I'm in charge of both of them. No, I shouldn't have done that. Okay, so we'll start off. It wants us to go through. Did everyone get a chance to read everything?
I did, but I have to say that the employment one was hard for me to wrap my brain around it. So I don't know if I'll be able to answer much questions from that one.
Yeah, so for that part, they gave us like a brief overview of everything that was in there that I'm supposed to read to make sure everyone kind of understands what's going on with each
Awesome.
thing. Does anyone want to take a stab at it? Does someone explain what it means to have employment at will?
Basically, the employer gets to not have to tell anybody that they're fired, and the employee doesn't have to have any. I mean, they don't have to give a reason, and the employee can't really ask any questions or say, "Why are you firing me?" because it's an at will. So anybody can terminate anytime without any reason or cause.
I think that well, I guess that covers it. I was going to say that they can fire, the employer can fire anybody, and the employee can quit without any notice. However, I think it's really interesting because it's not really the case at all. It's because they can ask for a reason, and you better have a good one, otherwise you're going to be in big trouble.
In a lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's so many exceptions.
Yeah.
Yes.
In Wyoming, you are not required to have a reason, and the employer does not have to give you one. Well, I saw 5 people get it for no reason at all, just because they didn't like them. And they tried to fight on it, and Wyoming was like, no, sorry, they didn't have to give you a reason.
Yeah, Nevada's an at-will employment state as well. However, the exceptions, the breach of implied contract and the laws, you know, the discrimination laws, disability laws, things like that, they all protect the employees so much so that it kind of invalidates the at-will. I mean, like I said, you better have a really good reason to do it, otherwise you're gonna be in trouble.
That's in Nevada, you said?
Yeah.
I wonder what it's like in California, because they're interesting in California usually with laws like that. I can imagine it's something interesting.
Well, there's some at will states. Didn't they say there was like, was it 20 or something that were or that weren't? Anyway, it seems like there was almost half of them or a third of them.
Yeah, that seems about right. Half of them, yeah. I just think it's funny. I think that they should just do away with it. I mean, because it sends the wrong message. Like, I know my employer, they kind of take the attitude of, well, we'll fire whoever we want, but that's not really the case. You really can't do that. You've got to have the documentation. You have to have, you know, I mean, we let a girl go, and she came back and said it was because, you know, gender discrimination, because we had no documentation. So you really have to be careful.
Did she win that fight, or did she lose it?
Well, she didn't press it. She just threatened.
Oh.
She didn't. Yeah.
So they want us to go through each contract kind of a thing and see if we understand each one. So the first one is like breach of implied contract. Does anyone understand that? I have like a small definition that I'm supposed to read if no one understands it. Does someone want to try to describe what breach of implied contract means?
Well, basically, lawyers will try to come up with anything. So if you say you're going to hire somebody $40,000 a year, that can be an implied contract. You could be saying that you're going to pay that, or that person's employed for 1 year. Or if you have an employee file full of praises and performance reviews, then that could be interpreted as an implied contract.
So the way they describe it is is basically what she said. when you get hired on, the employee or the employer has a set of like rules or established guidelines that they have to follow. They say like, okay, well, if you do these things, then this will happen, or if you break these 3 things, or if you're in violation of whatever, of this list of stuff, then we give you a demerit, or we give you some type of thing to let you know that at the end of a certain point, if you keep having these faults, then you're going to be terminated at the end of the contract. So the way they describe it is, this is a contract between the employer and the employee that is created by the actions of the employer. The employer could imply that the employee will have continued employment by making statements about how well the employee is doing. The employer could also create an implied contract through an employment manual that details termination practices. For example, 3-strike policy, and you're gone. So the next one is breach of employee. This is super interesting stuff. This is like the most boring one we've had so far. Okay, so then it's like breach of implied contract of good faith and fair dealing. Does anyone understand what that means?
I'm reading it again.
Yeah, I'm reading it because I'm like, this is really hard to get through.
That's okay.
A lot of times employers will make promises and then they don't keep them.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, we're going to pay you, commission. We'll pay you blah, blah, blah if you complete this many sales. And then does it, and they say, oh, well, then they let them go. Or they have a ton of sick leave saved up and they don't want to pay them out. And so they'll find some cause to terminate them so they don't have to pay it. So basically,
That's exactly what it is.
them not keeping their promises. And an employee can come back and file a lawsuit if they have reason to believe that that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's basically trying to get out of paying benefits and yeah.
Yeah, so this basically, you guys hit it really well. It just comes into play when the employer has agreed to certain things, but then they don't uphold their side of the contract. Then the employee can come back and sue them, everything. And the next one is violation of public policy. Does anyone know what that one is?
That's basically all the laws that we learned about, the Title VII termination laws, the Disability Act, and what's the other one?
This is the whistleblower act.
Let's see.
Require somebody to whistleblower.
Oh,
Yeah, firing people for doing things that they don't want to do.
yeah.
Like dating within, like dating your boss, or what else does it say?
Serving on a jury, being a subpoena.
Illegal activities, things like that.
Yep.
We had a case in our other marketing class just this week where we had to decide what we do when a salesperson was being pressured by his manager to defame their competitors when they were going in trying to sell their security equipment. And it made me think of that. That's about the one takeaway I have from this. It was really clear blue. I was reading it too. It was hard to get through, but yeah, you can't be pressured to either defame or to lie or be, by the company or your superiors either.
Yeah, so that's basically it. You basically they can't fire you for not wanting to do unlawful things. Like if you want to serve on jury duty, they can't fire you for serving on jury duty, or blowing the whistle on somebody, or filing workers' comp, or refusing to date someone's boss. They can't fire you for those things.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting, when I worked at FedEx, I got called to do jury duty one time, and I remember I gave it to him. I said, "Hey, I have to do jury duty," and it was like 2 weeks before jury duty, and they're like, "We need a month advance, otherwise you can't do it." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I just got this in the mail yesterday," and they made like this huge deal about it, and they're like, "Oh, you're in violation of this code, this code, and this code." And I
You're
was
gonna
like,
violate the law if you don't go to jury duty too. So
I was like, oh, I don't know what to tell you. I just got this in the mail like yesterday. I just got it, bringing you today. And they were all, I remember they were so upset about it. It was such a bizarre thing to be upset about. But
that's crazy because the place I worked at was just a daycare at the time. And they were like, "Oh, that's fine. We'll pay you anyways." I was like, "Y'all pay me for leaving?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Cool." Like, all right.
Yeah,
Go to
but
work.
employers have to be really careful about that. And most
Yeah.
companies they have to honor jury for this exact reason. Because if they try to do disciplinary action for you doing something that you're legally obligated to do, they can get in big trouble.
yeah, my boss was she was a special sparkle star. That's what we called her. She struggled with basic human functions.
Oh
So.
my gosh. Oh my gosh.
All right. The next one is discrimination status. That's pretty self-explanatory. Discriminated upon race, gender, religion, national origin, and things like that. Okay, so the next part is about the other reading we were supposed to do when it comes to, what was it called? 2 tough calls. That's what it was called. We're supposed to look at this. We're supposed to look at it through with both employees in mind, with Terry first and then Phil. First of all, when I was reading this, I felt like super upset at the person who was writing this, whoever this woman was, because she was like totally bagging on these people for just like the one guy. What's his name? Terry.
Yeah.
She was like ripping on him because she's like, oh, he has a gun in his car. Oh, he has all these things. He could come in and shoot us all. I thought that was such a bizarre way to look at your employees. Like, oh, that's kind of discriminatory, I guess.
We had trouble finding a girlfriend. I'm like,
Yeah.
finding me in a comb over.
In a comb over.
Poor Terry.
I felt bad for Terry. I was like, oh, poor Terry. He's getting ripped on. Okay, so so first we'll talk about the financial obligation. We'll go through Terry and then we'll go through Phil. So what impact does Terry have on the company's bottom line?
Sounds like none.
When he got hired,
Be a negative impact.
That's true. They're paying to keep him there almost, it sounds like.
Yeah. He's friends with the CEO.
yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of like politics involved with this guy. Like office politics, considering like she gave him the 2.5 and then all of a sudden everyone showed up at her office and was super angry at her.
Well, even the hiring policy, it sounds like that usually there were several interviews, you know, and that he didn't pass any of them at any level, but still was hired on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. So then when according to that though, what obligations does the manager have to the company based on that information? So according to the manager, Terry makes no contribution, so his salary and benefits are pure cost. In a company that only makes $300,000 a year, Phil seems like a less of a financial liability than Terry. So what obligations does the manager have to the company based on that information?
Well, she needs to
Get rid of Terry.
Yeah.
But he hates Phil. So
Her manager hates Phil, but she knows that Terry's the more of the drag on the company. So
I think this is one of those like negative situations with corporations that come into play where like who do you please? Because on one hand, if she fires Terry, then it puts her in a bad spot with the CEO and the upper management because they like the guy obviously. But then if she keeps Terry, then it weighs her down. But then if she doesn't fire Phil, then Phil's essentially more productive than Terry. But then they want Phil out. So who do you? And then Phil has all these health problems and then you get into the problem with like the HR problems where you want to fire him, but then he can come back and almost sue you maybe because you fired him based on his health reasons, not on performance.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole. I would leave that one alone for sure.
Which one? That Phil?
Yeah.
Especially after your company like went to his house, like did his garden all up, and like everyone gave their vacation days for him so he could be sick, and then you're gonna fire him out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think what I've learned the most from this class is that you really have to be careful in your hiring process more than anything else.
Yes.
Because it's hard to fire somebody if you're being responsible, like you're trying to be legally responsible. You really can't just fire people, or you shouldn't. They have the intelligence and the resources. They can really come back. They can really come back to you. So their hiring process should be. I mean, that whole issue with Terry, that was a big no-no.
Yeah.
Plus, she was blaming her
management. Sorry.
No, sorry. She was, what is the manager's name or whatever? I can't even, did it say her name? She was blaming herself for Terry not being a good employee. She was like blaming it on her lack of managerial skills or something. Like, Terry was bad before she came, like before she was a manager over her. So,
yeah.
I like that she first to solve the problem, though, by going to him and working with him, and she tried to find ways to help him improve his skills and to make him a benefit to their department or team.
Unlike the other manager that was just giving him jobs that it was okay to screw up on.
Yeah.
Well, and even when they go in and do, like, when she does the evaluation, they kind of have a guideline in the company policy, but like they say, how many of them get the PIP and then none of them get fired. So now you've got dead weight, or you got to trim the fat and all that. Well, if you're not trimming anything and you're not getting rid of anybody, then you're not helping the company. We can't move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if your company's.
They wasn't doing anything.
It would be interesting to see their salaries too of these guys, considering the company only makes $300,000. If you were to fire them both, you could almost, if they make $50,000 each, you would almost increase it by like 50% your overall profit. But I don't know if you would want to do that given Phil's health situation. That could end up financially dooming your company.
I thought it's funny that Phil thinks he's getting a promotion. I'm like, poor Phil.
Okay, so the next part is the legal obligation that they have. Based on what we've learned about employment at will and expectations, what legal obligations could the manager have to Phil and Terry?
Did it say how many employees the company had?
I didn't see it.
I don't remember that either.
I feel like with Phil, they said he should have been fired a long time ago based on like their company rules or something of if they weren't promoted in 3 years, then they fire him. And since they already hadn't done that, I feel like Phil can easily be like, they are only firing me because I'm sick or because I was sick. Since they already didn't follow those other rules.
Yeah.
The company had 600 employees, but were they fired?
They have how many?
The company itself has 600 employees.
It's 600 employees.
Yeah,
and they only make 300,000.
$300,000 a year.
They like make $3 each.
That's so bad.
It's awful.
Well, especially where they're
Microsoft people, and they took on their policies, but they didn't do anything. I mean, Phil, they should have gotten rid of him because he's not doing his part, and Terry, they should have just, after a while, since he wasn't doing anything, they should have gotten rid of him too. I know you got to have backup. I mean, if you want to have documentation, because it said with Terry, they tried, but nothing was happening. So, okay, so trim him, get rid of him. And with the other one, had problems, he wasn't thinking on his own, going to people, causing extra time, so costing the company money. So, in that respect, I would take Terry out first, and then with Phil, or probably maybe come back and say, okay, this is the scenario. This is what has to happen. This is your deadline. And if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. Then I'm sorry, you're out of the job.
Yeah, some of the things that it lists is Terry could come back and possibly the two things that he could file for if he were to sue the company would be breach of implied contract and age discrimination, and then Phil could do disability discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so the next part is ethical obligations. What ethical obligations does the manager have to Phil or Terry when it comes to the company, to the other employees, and to herself? So the ethical obligations. What does she have to Terry?
Well, Terry thinks he's doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
And so then to have, he's gotten all these great performance reviews in the past. And so it would be kind of a shock to him to all of a sudden be fired, given his past performance reviews.
Mm-hmm.
He even considered himself a 3.0 on the grade scale.
Yeah.
But a 3.0 isn't necessarily great, is it? I mean, it's just saying you're meeting the standard.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, 2.5 was grounds for firing, and then 3.0 is meeting standards.
Fairly, yeah.
But even still, in his mind, he's doing what it takes to get by. So it would be kind of.
Well, I think you have to bring him in and say, okay, this is what you're not doing.
Yeah.
This is why you're getting a 2.5.
What's interesting is that it doesn't seem like she documented anything that he's doing wrong. It just seems like, oh, we got to cut people, so we're going to fire him. But there's no point where she said, okay, we sat down with him here and we explained you're doing a bad job. And then we sat down with here again and we're told he's doing a bad job. It's just like, oh, we're gonna kick him out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then with Phil, you've got just everybody's trying to help him get better and going over to his house, and
he's expecting a promotion.
Yeah.
You really have a lot of emotion invested in Phil. So if you were to let him go, then all of a sudden, that's really going to affect the other employees.
His family. Yeah.
See, I think
They're going to look at it as, well, I gave him my vacation time, and you're letting him go, so why did I give him my vacation time?
Mm-hmm.
it says at the bottom of this part about Terry, he doesn't think he's all this. I don't think, because it says the last paragraph on Terry says, on the positive side, he knew he wasn't a superstar on the team, so it wouldn't be a massive shock. I think he was expecting a 3.0. He actually gave himself one. So it doesn't sound like, I mean, you know, when you're in a group, you can kind of tell sometimes if there's people that have a better understanding or have more skills in a certain area than you do. And I don't know. I don't know that he thinks he's doing as well as what we think. Maybe he does, but I say, I don't know. Maybe he doesn't think he's doing as badly as what she does. But
yeah, that's true. That's a good point.
All right, we're going to jump to the next part. I got like 10 parts to get through. Here we go. The next part is the analysis of the company's HR practices. So there's like 7 questions we have to go through regarding their HR policy and see what you guys think about it. So how well is the company in this case doing with its HR practices in general?
It's not.
nope.
I mean, they're really not doing anything. You know, they will let the one guy slide when they're not saying anything. So
they even have an HR.
They have a policy of PIP, but they're not using it.
Yeah, the PAP is one of the next questions. We'll talk about that because that was an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
The PAP, essentially death row of
Yeah.
employment.
Now we know. If someone says that to us, we're done.
So how does this company hire? Does it go in line with HR practices, good practices of HR?
I would say no.
Well, I'm sorry, Kaylee, go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, didn't he say that, or she said that she hires a lot of people that are like her?
Yeah.
So isn't that a little bit of discrimination? I mean, she said not everyone, but she was like, the majority is like her, young.
Discriminatory, yeah. I felt like just reading it, there was a lot of discrimination.
She was pretty, like she said, she's definitely an A-type personality.
Yeah.
What was interesting, I thought, was like she hires people according to how long, like how well they're gonna work, like how many hours they're gonna work for. Like if they're willing to work 80 hours a week for her, then they're gonna hire her. But how many people in the general population are gonna want to work 80 hours a week when it's not required of them? Like that's a very specific type of person you're trying to hire on your team. And so I think when you reflect, when you're basing your employment people off of that spectrum, and then you put Terry in the mix, that's a huge offset that you have going on, where he's probably only going to work 30, 40 hours a week, maybe 45, 50. But these people over here are working from 6 to 6 every day, or 6 to 9 o'clock at night every day, trying to pump in the work, where he's like, oh, I'm good. I'm doing good things. I'm killing it. I need a promotion.
They're also not getting, when she hires all these people that are like her, they're not getting a very big or broad view of other things that different personalities and different characteristics bring to the table. You know, if they're all the same personality, they need a wider range. That can help bump up to 300,000 to something else as well.
Well, and they're all very aggressive like her. The one that she's hiring, she's very aggressive. Well, she's very blunt with things, you know. So he's hiring people that are aggressive and that don't care about how many hours they're going to put in. Well, Gavin, like you said, there are some people that can say, well, I'm only working 45, that's it. I'm out of here.
I'm sure none of them had comb-overs either.
No, because they were young.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an interesting comment.
It made me laugh.
He doesn't have a girlfriend, he has a comb over.
Those are the interview questions.
Recipe
How's
for
your dating
disaster.
life? Because that affects your job.
So the next question is, do you agree with the way the company uses PIPs?
No, because they're not consistent.
No.
I mean, well, it's not fair, first of all. Second of all, it's not consistent. Like it says in here, someone with real problems who is still valued. So say like somebody with the sexual harassment tendencies would not be pipped. But would
What
be
does sexual harassment tendencies mean?
But I mean, that talk about if you're gonna pip somebody, you should pip them.
There's never like, you're kind of on, it's not like a fence issue. You're either doing that or you're not doing that.
Tendency.
Well, from the company's perspective, though, she said that's where they kind of set everything up and make sure legally they're covered. And if that's the process, I think they're stupid as well. I mean, it doesn't sound like they were a productive thing as well, but it was more to cover their own rear if somebody came back after them.
Yeah,
And they said they could fire
like,
someone anyways without doing the PIP, so why even do them? Why waste
Because
time?
it covers it if they come back, they could say, oh, we did this or we tried to do that. But they just need to do performance reviews and be honest all the way through someone's employment instead of trying to shove it all in at the end.
Yeah.
Sounds like if you got a PIP, then you're done for.
The way they compared that too, like, oh, if you have sexual harassment tendencies or if you show up late to work, you're going to get fired either way.
Yeah.
Like, I feel it's a little bit of an extreme situation.
Yeah, except for the guy with those tendencies wasn't even put on a PIP.
Yeah.
So
It wasn't PIP.
Wasn't even pipped.
Wasn't Pip.
It's like the manager said, she doesn't like it because, downgrading people. Everybody thinks, well, I'm going to be able to, help my job out and stuff like that. But in the HR office and stuff, they're saying, well, get rid of it, get rid of it. And start making documentation. So, because he states that, he doesn't like it because it's condescending. She doesn't like it because it's condescending.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely demoralizing for sure.
Yep.
All right, so the last question with the HR practices is, do you think this manager can make good decisions about these two individuals, or does she seem to be influenced by bias that will be hard to overcome?
Bias. She's got prejudice against come-overs.
Well, and she has the manager's biases too. I mean, she's got her own, and then she's got theirs as well. So
I think it could be easier to fire Terry now since Phil went through all the health stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But if he hadn't have gotten sick, I'm sure they'd have been like, no, we don't like Phil, fire him instead.
All right, so then the next section is your guys' final decision. So you're supposed to think about it for 1 minute, and then we're supposed to ask each person in the group what they would do with respect to Phil and Ted. Or Phil and Terry.
I'm like, Ted? Who's Ted?
That's a sexual harassment tendency guy.
Fire him. Give him a pep.
Give him a pep, bro.
Bro.
All right, let's see. Let me pull up this one thing real fast.
I like never mind. I definitely. Are we talking? Or are we still supposed to be?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
I definitely think we better leave Phil alone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we better do anything with Phil just yet. I think we better sleep on that one for a few more nights. But Terry, I don't know.
She's scared Terry's going to shoot up the place too, right?
I'm so sure he's going to shoot up the place.
Don't work in Texas. Everyone has a gun in their car.
And he's 15 years older than her. That's scary. That's really scary.
Well, I would still look at it as, I would terminate him, and then, people aren't going to like it, but I would be like, let's see what happens in 6 months when he's not here.
So you would fire Terry?
I would fire Terry, yeah.
What about Philip? Would you fire Philip?
Want to for a little while because, like you said, we're, everybody's gone over and helped him and all that kind of stuff. So I think we need to not do that right now because then, he could retaliate back on us.
Well, now we're kind of with Terry. He could retaliate as well because there's no documentation, right? I mean, what? I guess my question is, do we have to fire either one of them right now, or can we? Because I think we need to build a case for Terry before we let him go.
That's the decision you're supposed to come to right now. You're supposed to figure out what you would do.
I think. Well, I guess you would put in the PIP and say, okay, this is your performance. This is what from here on out we're going to start documenting your performances and then like 3 months down the line we're going to look at it, and if it's not doing anything, then here you go, you're out the door. So then you got documentation, you got legal representative, and you can go from there. Wait till he gets back. He's back now, but get him where he's back to his normal hours or whatever. Do the same thing. I mean, you got it in your policy that you're gonna, do that stuff. So why not do it instead of just letting everybody lay low?
I would give Terry the 2.5, and I would give Phil, I think, the 3.0. I think that's what she was talking about doing. And then build a case towards getting Terry out. I'd leave Phil alone for a while.
Mm-hmm. I agree, because I kind of feel bad if they just fired Terry right away. Like you said, he hasn't really been told that he's not a great employee. I mean, he knows he's not the best, but he doesn't think he's necessarily the worst either. I feel like if they just fired him, he'd be like, no one even gave him, or like told him why, or helped him get better, gave him a chance. So, give him more time. But I would give him the 2.5 maybe and start that now, like you said, Blue.
I agree with what everybody said. I'd give him the 2.5, and I probably wouldn't wait too many more months and probably let it go, and go back and document where, as a manager, I did try to give him opportunities to learn and grow, and nothing has changed in his performance. And I don't know, list some of those things to protect yourself, but yet if he's not contributing, I know when we interviewed the human resource people at the beginning of the semester, one thing that the gal that I interviewed said was that you have to separate emotion from, I'm hired by the company and I need to do what's best for the company. And so even though it's hard, because you become friends with people or get to know them better, your colleagues, she said it's still what's best for the business. So I think I would let Terry go eventually, but first give him the 2.5 and let it sit for a few months. And then Phil, I would give him the 3.0 and keep him on as well. I wouldn't let him go.
Yeah, what's interesting about, I think, my past life in the FedEx world is like the amount of documentation that was done. And I never really realized it until at this class. Like the reason it was doing it is just building a case against me. I thought I was just there doing it just because. But anytime I violated any rule, they had to document it. They had to like process it. I had to come in and sign something, and they would input into the computer, and I'd like electronically sign it. So every time, I mean, anything from like one time I wore socks that had like a Nike swoosh on them, and your socks can't have anything on them. They have to be either solid black or solid white. And so one time my socks had a Nike swoosh, and I got written up for it. I remember like getting written up for all these things. And it was all just to build the case against me. It's kind of intense.
Do they check your socks when you get to work or what?
Yeah, they do.
Holy cow.
It's a terrible place to work.
They're like sharpening it in.
You just fold it down.
That works too.
If your shoes had white on them, you had to Sharpie it out. So.
Oh my god.
Oh my God.
It was fantastic. Loved it. Okay, so the next part is we have to. Did you guys read the part 2 of what happened to everybody?
I did.
I did too.
If you haven't, I have to give you 5 minutes to read it. It's kind of sad.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody get a chance to read it?
Yeah.
All good.
Basically, Terry went somewhere else and Phil died. Oh, that's terrible.
You just ruined the ending for someone. No.
Spoiler alert there. My bad.
That was so sad.
That's so sad.
It is sad.
So
I
what
like
do you
the way I like the way they handled it though with them both. Seemed like
Yeah.
super respectful. I didn't expect it to be that smooth, or I don't know. It just seemed like he really planned out what he was going to say, and he got to keep his relationships with them outside of the company, which I think is cool.
You know, I think it's really interesting. She did a good job communicating with Terry and being, you know, the article we read about open and honest communication. I think she did a good job of that there. And basically, he quit. They didn't fire him or let him go, which is what you want as an employer, because then they can't collect unemployment. Then your unemployment ratings don't go up. So,
Plus, it's more respectful for him, though, too. When he goes to get another job, he wasn't fired.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
they
that,
didn't force him to immediately either. They were just like, you know, figure it out what you need to do. You know, you're not going to be stuck without a job. Just find a new one and then transition.
yeah, it was really good, like really respectful, and it was handled really well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think she was giving him an opportunity to make the exit when he was ready, but yeah, he knew that in the long run, he probably wasn't fit for the position, which gave him where he had to think about, you know, okay, where am I at with the company? I know I'm not that good, so maybe it is best if I go find something else. So, I mean, she was really nice. I thought she was very honest and straightforward with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes in our jobs, we're not really happy there. We know we're not growing. We know we're not, you know, progressing, but we're too, I don't know what the word would be.
Comfortable.
Yeah, too comfortable. We're just too comfortable. We know we need to do something else. And so it was good. It was a good thing for him to help, that she helped him realize that. And
realize his potential, because now he's managing other people and he seems like he loves it. So
It's just a better fit for him where he ended up.
now he's at the top and not the bottom anymore.
Yeah.
There wasn't an elder Bednar team that said if you're not in a job that you're comfortable with, it's time to leave. And then find something that meets your needs and your happiness, because all it is dragging you down. And I think some of us, like you said, we get comfortable in our job, so we're afraid to step out of the box. When we don't step out of the box, then we stay put. Because we're comfortable. We don't want to go, we're too afraid to go someplace else.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, he's probably making better money for the new company he's with anyway, so.
And he's going to work because he feels like he's competent at what he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, when he sat down and visited with him and he looked at everybody on the team, he could see that he didn't really measure up to what the others were contributing.
Yeah.
You want to go somewhere where you feel like you're making a difference, where you're doing productive work.
I think it's cool because now that he's a manager, he can see how his manager treated him, and now he can use that if he has to fire people in the future at his place and still be respectful about it.
Good point.
What do you think about how the way they handled Phil? Didn't they handle that accordingly, or do you think that was mishandled, or what do you guys think?
no, I think they did good. They did the best they could.
Yeah, they had to find a replacement because he was gone a long time. They said it was like, what, 7 months that his journey was, that it lasted.
But they allowed him to stay with the team, but he just didn't. Too ill. I think they did the best they could.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah, we had a guy. I saw FedEx is so crazy. We had a guy at FedEx who he got really sick, and he couldn't drive a car anymore. So they put him at the front desk. They moved him from a driver to the front desk, but he couldn't lift anything. So that's a problem. So because that's all you do. And so then they put him as like just the cashier, but then he had to have a helper all the time. And then he only could work 1 day a week. So eventually they like whittled him down to where he was only working like 2 hours a week, and he had to take a cab from his house to work. So he ended up losing money every week that he had to work because the cab cost more than what he was making.
Aww.
So then he eventually just quit, but that's all they could do, and so he couldn't sue the company. They said they tried, but you know his health restrictions didn't allow him. So I'm relating that to this story where they just couldn't really do much for him, given the job requirements and what it demanded. And that guy died too.
Oh.
That's so terrible. But he was old though. He was like 70, 80 years old. Okay, so the final wrap up. What can we learn from this case about making decisions about termination?
I think it's wise to not make hasty decisions. Take time and weigh it out. There were things that each of you mentioned. Some of them I hadn't even thought of that were good. So, you know, I think get all your ducks in a row and then kind of, I guess, look at the situation as a whole, where it's come from, where you're going with it, and all the implications that can come from terminating or not terminating. So
It's not as easy to just say you're fired. You can't just do that. So yeah, it takes a lot of documentation. I think that's one of the main things I got out of this class is document everything. Documentation.
Well, I think it's good that you have maybe sit-down meetings with the employees that are having difficulty, that you can sit down and be honest with them and say, this is what I see, what are you looking at, you know? I mean, try to work with them as much as you can, but documentation is like the number one kicker to this thing. If you don't keep documentation, you don't know where to go.
I think it's important to not tell your employees they're good. Don't tell your employees they're doing good if they're not, because then they don't learn anything, and you're just digging yourself in a bigger hole when you want to fire them.
I think that documentation is key, like Naomi said, but I think it can work both ways as well. I think, like as the boss, you have to document whether or not something's going well or bad. But as an employee, you should have a way to document, like, oh, this was discussed, but it was never documented that I did something good, or like I did something, I went above and beyond. She's only documenting things that went wrong. That's kind of my perspective on things. I don't know if that's ever going to happen, but like, because you know, you can document all the bad things that's always happened, but I don't know if anyone ever documented the good things that I did. Mostly just the bad things.
Well, I feel like almost from the readings that we've done this semester, as an employer, it's kind of to your disadvantage to document the thing. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I mean,
you're saying you think the employers are at a disadvantage if they document things?
yeah.
The good things. Yeah.
So if you have an employee file full of, you know, just nothing but praises for an employee, how does that benefit you as the employer? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Get rid of all the praises right before you fire them. No, I'm just joking.
Actually, I'm going to ask Sister Steph's this tonight, because a couple weeks ago we talked about, there was an article we read, and they talked about how they would take things out of the file, the employee file. Remember that? Like if they had done well,
yeah,
be removed. Yeah. Can you do that? Like
that seems illegal to me. Why? I mean, if you can't remove the bad stuff, why can you remove the good stuff? I mean,
right.
At FedEx, once again, like always, our documentation would fall off every 6 months. So every 6 months, the file would drop, if whatever had happened would fall off. So you would have like a 6 month running tally of everything that happened.
I see. So basically you had if you're doing like a 3-strike policy, you had 3 strikes within 6 months.
Yeah, and then like if you got in like a car accident, like you hit somebody or it was deemed your fault, then that would stay on your record for a year.
Oh, I see.
So basically, like a year to 6 months would be documented, and once that running clock would go up a day, then that anything a year ago would fall off, or 6 months would fall off.
I like that they have the opportunity to make it right.
Yeah.
Well, just have that stuck on your record at work forever.
I do too. Actually, I like that as well.
Well, and I think what's wrong with some of the states that have that at will is because they can fire and they don't care. You know, if they don't like you, you're out the door. If you're not with the group, you're out the door. I think that's wrong because they may be doing a good job, but because you don't like them, they're shoving you out the door. I saw that happen to a really good friend of mine, and man, it killed him and his family. And he'd been working there for probably 15 years. And he had a good rapport with everybody. He did the top of his job, but the 2 at the top did not like him because he knew more than they did. So, and they came in one day and said, "We don't need you anymore. See you bye."
Wow.
And in Wyoming, you could do that. You do not have to have documentation. I was like, "You guys are crazy. Get the heck out of the state."
Well, I think they could file a lawsuit for sure.
Well, they did, but when they did, it all came back that the airport had a right to do it. They really should have done just cause. And we found out that the attorney was paying the judge, and the judge that was making the decision was the one who was on the airport side and not for the outcome of everybody.
Wow. Sounds like a mess all around, huh?
Sounds like a case for Longmire.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah,
All
he
right.
can't stop moving, so crazy.
That's it. We're done. Do I have to post this somewhere?
Yeah, on the discussion board.
On the discussion?
Yeah, there's a discussion.
So I just push stop broadcast, and then what do I do?
You're gonna take the link and copy
Yeah, there's a link in the bottom.
Well, I definitely can't understand 2 of you at the same time.
Okay, go ahead, Blue.
There's like a little like paperclip in the bottom right-hand corner.
For
and
links?
yeah. And then you copy the YouTube link.
Okay.